The Roman Republic would eventually become the model for most modern governments, so it's important to understand its structures and its limitations in ancient Rome. The word republic comes from a Latin phrase, res publica, which means public matters. And the whole idea of the republic was that the Romans hated kingdoms because they didn't like monarchs after their bad experience with the cruel Etruscan kings. So they wanted a kind of government that really brought the best of every kind of government they knew. So they borrowed a lot from the Greeks in terms of aristocracies and monarchies and democracies and tried to establish what they saw as the most successful kind of government. You can see that on the emblazoned on this flag here, the motto of the Roman Republic, which was Senatus Populusque Romanus, which means the Roman Senate and people. Essentially, the idea was that the Roman government would always be supported by the people and vice versa. An important part of understanding the Roman Republic was understanding the class system because it was built into the structure of the Republic. At the top, you had the patricians. Patricians were sort of the founding families of Rome. They were the landowners and the political elite. And they represented a pretty small sliver, maybe about 10% of the Roman city's population, and smaller throughout the rest of the Republic. Most other people were plebeians. For the most part, these were either urban workers or farmers. And then you had slaves. As Rome expanded beyond central Italy, conquered people were enslaved, and Rome was really an empire that relied a lot on slave labor. The basic structure of the Roman Republic had two consuls at the top who served as the chief executive. The consuls were advised by a group of senators, 300 in number. And one thing to notice is that both of these are made up of patricians. Now, the plebeians could vote for senators and for consuls, but they weren't represented in the early republic. So later on, it was decided that they should have some representation, and so a new position was created, the assemblies, most importantly the public assembly. And the assemblies elected tribunes who would represent the plebeians in the Roman government. The Senate is probably the most important structure. Senators came from the patrician class. They could be elected by the plebeians, but only patricians served. And the main job of the Senate, in theory, was to advise the consuls. But in practice, because senators served for life, they were able to amass a lot of power and wealth. And eventually the Senate really sort of controlled the rest of the Roman Republic. Consuls were the chief executives, and the Romans borrowed the idea from Sparta to have two chief executives, so there were always two consuls. And they had to agree in all matters, which essentially gave them veto power over each other. Consuls only served for 1 year. The idea was Rome didn't want to have anybody who might become king. But also in practice, that meant consuls couldn't do a whole lot without the support of the Senate. When the plebeians revolted early in the Republic, demanding representation, the Senate decided to give them an assembly, a representative body. And the assembly could appoint somebody called a tribune. The main job of the tribune was to sit in Senate, and they couldn't suggest legislation or, advise the consuls. But the one big job they had was to veto. The word veto in Latin means I forbid. And if the tribunes saw anything that they thought would negatively affect the plebeians, they could veto it and prevent the Senate from taking any action. So you have this intricate sets of checks and balances in the Roman Republic. At the same time, the Romans realized they lived in sort of a dangerous time and a dangerous place. And they thought sometimes it might be better to put all the power into the hands of one person in case of emergencies. And that position was called the dictator. The word dictator comes from the Latin word dicto, which means to speak. Because essentially, when the dictator was chosen by the Senate, whatever the dictator said was law. Dictators were chosen only in times of disaster, invasion, or wars, or civil unrest. And the idea was the dictator would take power for a set period of time, bring an end to whatever disaster Rome was experiencing, and then relinquish power. The best example of a dictator was Cincinnatus, a sort of semi-legendary figure who was chosen early in the Republic to put down an invasion by a foreign tribe. And it's said he left the plow, which you see here in the statue in the city of Cincinnati, Ohio, named after him. He left his plow and took up the fasces, which is the symbol of the Roman Republic, an axe surrounded by this bundle of rods. He put down the revolt, and then he quit and went back to his plow. So it's great in theory. Now, in practice, we'll see some dictators abuse their power without, the Senate being able to stop them. Rome also had a central law code called the 12 Tables. And on these 12 tables were, both civic and public law. So laws that concern the government and laws that concern the citizens. And the 12 Tables really became the central law code of the Roman Empire.